invite out as a 45-minute piece, so there is a possibility we're going to overrun slightly. Hopefully that isn't an issue for most people, but the session will be recorded and shared back afterwards, so feel free to dip back into that if you do need to drop off at 10:30. Again, obviously read the recording. We share it for public view. It goes up on our YouTube channel and can be shared out. Still feel free to obviously drop any questions into the chat. We will answer them as we go along. Looking forward to getting going. So George, if you want to just jump on to the next slide for me. So very quick introduction and agenda. Oh, George just skipped it. Excellent. So just in terms of a quick intro from me, I'm Guy. I'm commercial head of practice for modern work and security here at Transparity, and joined by George, who's technical head of practice for modern workplace. For those who haven't worked with us before or may not be familiar with us as an organisation, Transparity are a pure play Microsoft Cloud partner. That is all we do. We are very, very fortunate to hold all 6 partner designations that Microsoft put out. We also have 12 advanced specializations, plus a number of others around security and Azure. This puts us literally in the top 1% of partners, and I believe at this point we are the most accredited pure play partner in the UK. So really, really key to us as an organization is being focused on Microsoft. There are no competing products, there is no GCP, there's no AWS. It is Microsoft and Microsoft only, which allowed us to build over the last 8 years a very successful organization focused on Microsoft tech, and the ability, I think, to be able to call ourselves specialists in this area. So not something that we take for granted. I'm going to hand over to George in a moment. George will be running through the bulk of the technical detail. Today's session, there's a mix of slides. There are also some videos around some of the Copilot demos. Just one thing to note, because of how Teams puts the videos out in live, most of the videos don't have audio, so don't worry. It's very much a visual thing. However, if you click on screen during the video, it will pause it for you. When it resumes, it will resume from the same point, not from where everybody else is. So a little bit of a nuance there in Teams. So something to be aware of when the videos start. If you can try not to click the screen, otherwise you risk getting out of sync. It'll be a little bit of a challenge. And yes, thank you, Terence. Just that final kind of reminder. Any questions in the chat? There are a number of us from Transparity on today's call. Look forward to getting through the content and hopefully answering those questions. I do want to just very quickly put a little bit of a poll out. George, I don't know if I want to just hand to you because I'm not quite prepared, and then I'll just dip back in a minute and I can chuck it up on screen whilst you're talking, just to get a bit of a feel really of where people are in their what is likely to be very early journey with Copilot.
I'll put a nudge out once the poll is in there for anybody that's missed it. So welcome everybody. We've got quite a packed agenda today, so I will try to get through these as clearly and quickly as possible. Just again to reiterate, questions are more than welcome. We'll probably pick the majority of them up via audio at the end, unless anybody else on the call from the Transparency side can answer them. But they're absolutely encouraged. So really, with the first set of slides, we're going to go through a quick introduction into what Microsoft 365 Copilot is all about, and where it hopefully fits into your organizations. And really, with a quick scene set, we know that the IT world is constantly changing, perhaps more so recently than ever before. Industries are, entire industries are being created, whilst others are actually transforming rapidly at a great pace. We know that the drivers for success, and just as those polls come up on the screen, thanks, Guy. We know that the drivers for growth are also evolving with that as well. And with the increased presence and really the wider knowledge of AI capabilities at all levels of businesses, we know that technology is at this huge inflection point, both with the advance of AI and indeed still coming hot off the tails of the pandemic. Yes, we are still talking about that. So we know that things are changing. We know that AI is well and truly here. What has really changed to facilitate that? So I'm not going to go through all of these in any serious detail, otherwise we'd probably spend half an hour just covering this one slide. But we know that before this year and kind of really the tail end of last year, we knew that AI was good at specific targeted applications. So we knew, for example, that it was good at playing chess. We knew that it was capable of delivering chatbot-like experiences, but to get anything else out of it, you yourself had to be a specific expert in that field, or perhaps a particular researcher, with systems that were really designed to be good at one thing. And whilst fundamentally they could be transformed to apply to a different use, there wasn't really much in the way of a one-size-fits-all approach to things. Now, however, we know, and obviously we've got this iteration of so-called generative AI and things like ChatGPT, we know that we're able to really use AI at a far more advanced level. So we know, for example, that we can ask it to generate photography. We know that we can ask it to generate images and text and language. We know that we can apply AI to really go through and actually pass specific tests. So there's been examples out there of AI going and taking some very high level, graduate level exams, for example. We know that we can use it to even go ahead and perform coding. We know that it can recognize advanced images and videos, and indeed even transform them, which to many is quite an element of concern. But in the last year, a lot of these capabilities have really emerged in mainstream that were not really even imagined 12 or 18 months ago. And that's really shaped up or changed how things are shaping up. We know that our users are actually seeing it. So there's this graph that's been paraded around quite a lot over the last few months and years. If you look at some of the key technology elements that have entered into mainstream and their time to reach that 100 million user mark, ChatGPT has blown all of them out of the water. So big one on there, of course, is Facebook, the internet, mobile phones, taking several years to hit that mark, whereas ChatGPT, I think, was launched November last year and hit this mark some point in January. So we're seeing that not only are we needing to be aware of it, but indeed our users are. And what do our users think of it? So you may well know that Microsoft publish and commission these work trend index reports. We know that a lot of users are equal parts worried about AI replacing their jobs, but also that the vast majority would actually like to delegate some of those tasks to AI to actually lessen their workloads. And we know that employees are going to need aptitude to use these tools, and we know that leaders share that message as well. So about 82% of leaders there believing that employees will need to really pick up new skills to make the most of AI in the workplace and beyond. We know as well that digital debt is costing us innovation. So there's a high percentage there of employees that don't feel that they've really got sufficient time to perform their job to a suitable level. And if we see the so-called modern productivity measure, which is all around creation of content and rather than communicating, we can see that that metric is skewed very heavily to the amount of time that employees have spent communicating with one another, finding data, asking where that data exists, rather than actually providing solid content for the organization to grow. So around about 43% of time is spent creating, and hopefully with the advance of AI, we can see that actually increase quite dramatically. Not going to go through this in too much detail. There's tons of information out there around where Microsoft see themselves in the market and how they're absolutely committed to being at the front of so-called responsible AI. So Microsoft actively trying to lead on open and collaborative leadership around the integrity of AI, equality, all of the different regulatory challenges. And there was some solid work done through specifically the Copilot early access program around this. And there's tons of articles out there. There's various different blogs that we'd be more than happy to point you in the direction of if there's anything specific for your industry that you would like further information on. So let's get into the bulk of M365 Copilot and let's start seeing about how it can really interact with our sort of daily work life. This is going to be the first slide that's got a quick intro video. So again, just to highlight from Guy, that point around if you click the meeting, if you try to pause it, unpause it, you'll just fall out of sync with me for the first slide, but you'll pick back up when we switch on to the next one. And hopefully when I click play, we should be going through now. Hey, so we've seen quite a lot there. We've seen a lot about how we can use Copilot to generate that content. And one of the main things that you should be picking up from that video really is the co-nature of this element. So it's all around being a Copilot rather than an autopilot. What we don't want is for Copilot to be going off and actually performing all of these tasks for us and generating an email and sending it. Everything that we're doing around Copilot should be drafting content. It should be assisting us in the creation of that content and getting us to a solid starting point, summarizing things, revisiting it, rather than just actually automating everything we do. So there's still a huge element there that it's all about being Copilot rather than autopilot. So some quick summary points on here. So everything to do with M365 Copilot is about the access that you have got within your environment and your context within your organization. So everything that we see within Copilot is automatically inheriting everything that we as IT leaders are doing and controlling within our environment. So never a user is going to have access to data that they shouldn't do from a raw binary position. But what you may well find, and this is one of the things we talk about around the readiness of Copilot, is it may well actually present access or files that the user does have access to that perhaps they didn't know that they've got access to. So it's really important that you go through and you provide just enough access for your users across the data that you've got within your environment. As we said there, it's inheriting everything to do with security, compliance, and privacy. So where we potentially have retention labels in place, where we have data loss prevention to stop unauthorized data flow, Copilot will absolutely respect that. And that's an absolutely key point to get across when we discuss anything to do with Copilot. It's architected to protect the data. So whatever we're doing within Copilot, there's a lot of noise about how a lot of these AI tool sets, are learning how users are applying different prompts, how they're interacting with shared data sets or even global data that's out there. What we're doing within our environment and indeed our context is remaining specific to us. Microsoft are not using our prompts and how we interact with our data to alter what they're doing in Copilot for another tenancy. So again, there's absolutely no flow of data relating to you and your users outside of your environment. One of the key selling points of Copilot versus other generative AI tool sets, of course, is that it is integrated into the apps that our users are largely going to be using all day, every day. So across Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and even more of the Microsoft applications out there. I would be keen to stress that there are other Microsoft Copilots available. And of course, we're here today talking specifically about M365 Copilot. But keep in mind that you will be seeing Copilot across all of these applications, across the mobile experiences and indeed the web applications as well. The individual user and indeed the admin is always in control. So wherever Copilot is making or suggested changes to existing content, it will always do so in a draft or reversible format. And again, because we're using content that is hopefully stored in M365 at this point, we know that we've always got SharePoint's various different revision history to fall back on should changes be made that we don't ideally want. But Copilot will always make recommendations and only proceed to making changes if we go through another further prompt to actually make it do so. But Copilot is designed to learn new skills. So it's an ever evolving tool set. I know there's a lot of data that's come out of the early access program around how it's improved, how it is evolving, how it's able to learn new skills that are out there in the wider market. But again, keep in mind that what you're doing in your environment is never being used to actually train that model. So a little bit about how Copilot works, and we've got a nice visual that explains the core concept in a bit more detail. In the interest of time, we'll probably gloss over this fairly quickly. But again, if people have got questions and want to stick around at the end, we'll absolutely make some time to go through and explain the process in a little bit more detail. But essentially, when we're making a prompt through Copilot, the actual Copilot engine is receiving that prompt from a user in an approved application. So for argument's sake, that'll be Word or PowerPoint. Copilot is then processing that input through an approach that Microsoft will refer to as grounding, which essentially is improving how specific that prompt is. We're able to apply secondary information to that prompt, which you'll see in the demo slide. So not only asking Copilot to go and generate a document, but go and generate a document using this as a template. Go and use the look and feel of this additional document. Copilot will take that response then from the large language model. It will apply relevant processing to that. It will go through Microsoft's responsible AI checks. It will make sure that everything adheres to your organization's security, compliance, and privacy reviews. And then, of course, it will simply reply that response back to the application, where the user is then able to interact with it and assess the response and potentially ask for additional prompts thereafter. Just because we get a response back doesn't mean that it's going to be the finished article. And again, in the demonstrations that we're going to show you, we can see some examples of where actually we want to use Copilot to tweak the look and feel of particular text or indeed particular slides in certain scenarios. So in short, Copilot has got access to your business data and your indeed context within that organization. It's built on everything that we're already doing within our M365 tenants, or hopefully doing specifically around security, compliance, and privacy, and adding in that responsible AI element that Microsoft are absolutely trying to be front and center on. We know that it's embedded across those M365 apps. So again, that's a massive improvement over some of the more public and mainstream generative AI tool sets that are out there in the market. And of course, remember that it's doing so securely. So let's see a little bit more of it in action. So again, we've got another video here that I'm going to press play on. In this example, we're using Copilot to actually go and create a Word document, specifically in this example, an agenda for an event. Just so happens that that event for us is this exact webinar. So M365 Copilot, the AI-powered future of modern work. And we're also asking for it to specifically include how Copilot can add real value to the organization. So just as that hopefully goes through. Full disclosure, this isn't me typing. I'd like to think I'm a little bit faster at typing than that. But you can see in real world terms, that response takes a few seconds to actually go ahead and generate. And we can see live, because it's new content that Copilot is putting in. There's no need for it to put a prompt back to ask if we're absolutely certain that we want to make those changes. And there we have it. In less than a minute of this slide playing, we've got that content to hand. The onus is absolutely on us as the end user to go through and validate what Copilot has put together. And you can see further, maybe we pick a particular paragraph and we maybe want to change the tone of that. Maybe we think it's a little bit too wordy. That one in particular is, if you read through it, there's a little bit too many examples in there. And you can see we've got some very easy to use prompts there to change the tone in different ways. And we'll have Copilot go through and regenerate 3 different examples for us to choose through. You can also see that we've got the option there to replace or simply insert that below. And once we've got it to the point that we're happy with, there we go. So in under 2 minutes, we've got a draft agenda generated for our event. Again, full disclosure, we didn't use Copilot to actually build the agenda or any of these slides, but we absolutely could have done. Okay, second video slide. So now we're accessing M365 chat from Teams. We've got some solid recommendations from the simple new chat screen. You can see that there's some ideas and suggestions there. But what we're going to do now is we're going to pull in a document, and we're going to have Copilot essentially summarize that for us. So we want the actions detailed from this document. Copilot's going to go through, it's going to comb through that document. And it's going to pull out some key recommendations and some key details from that document without us having to read through the entirety. I like to imagine this as customers putting in one of our proposal documents and just asking for summary of what the costs involved are, perhaps, or what the prerequisites are. And you can see there that we've got some additional prompts to actually ask some additional questions. And really think of M365 Chat as an element of Copilot, which really is your personal assistant and really your personal search engine in the context of work. Okay. So we've seen it, M365 chat in Teams. We've seen the Copilot engine from a Word perspective. We've got some other slides now that will go through and show you Copilot in various different Office applications. I'm going to press play on this one. And again, there shouldn't be audio with this one, but it may well play. And in this example, what we're asking Copilot to do is to go off and generate a PowerPoint summarizing an existing Word document. So we've got a proposal document. Now we need to present that back to a customer, go off and create a short presentation based on our Word document. And you can see very quickly, Copilot has taken the key information from that. We want to add additional slides in, asking about a particular item. And again, Copilot is reminding us to check the information that's come back for accuracy. Maybe there's additional changes we want in here. Maybe this slide is a little bit too wordy. So what we're going to ask it to do is make that more visual, but move that text into the speaker note so that when we present it through, we've still got all of the text in there to read through from notes, and also to add some additional animations into that slide as well. And again, very quickly, we've created the initial draft proposal presentation to go with an existing Word document. So again, incredibly powerful here, how we can generate that content from existing examples that already exist in our environment that we've got access to, or creating it actually from scratch. Seeing Copilot in Excel. So again, should be playing now for you. In this example, we've got some sample Q1 performance data across our environment, and now we want Copilot to analyze that data and potentially show some specific trends, and maybe pick out a couple of key examples. And you'll see that Copilot will come back with 3 key trends. There's an example here that a particular customer is down, so let's get Copilot to show us a particular breakdown of that customer, and you can see that it's created a new sheet within that data Excel. So it's not actually altered the data, it's just added a new sheet. And we've got some prompts in here to make the data more visual. So in this example, we're asking it to apply basically conditional formatting very quickly to highlight some of the key numbers and metrics, and also asking it to make some recommendations based off maybe previous quarter's growth. And again, you'll see that it will automatically suggest adding a new table in there. And it's also quite crucially showing it's working as well. So not only is it going to create that content, but it's going to also show you the workings of how it's arrived at those figures. And of course, additional prompts would more than likely be able to drill down further or show additional years, maybe base it off similar growth that we've seen from other customers that are in the initial data sheet. So again, incredibly powerful in Excel as well. And you're hopefully starting to get the feel that Copilot is also here to help bridge the gap for users that maybe are fairly confident in Word, Excel, but don't know how to easily add some of these more so-called advanced features such as conditional formatting. It's able to do it very quickly so that the user doesn't need to be an out-and-out expert of the Office applications to do all of that. Moving on to Copilot in Outlook now. So we'll see in this example how Copilot is able to provide that catch-up view, and we'll basically be able to drill our inbox down into smaller bite-sized chunks, pulling in 3 specific examples of emails that we need to catch up on. So in this example, there's a bit of text in there basically asking me to present this session rather than somebody else. And we get a similar view from the Outlook client experience as well on mobile devices. So Copilot is built into the mobile applications as well. And again, we can pull in data that exists in OneDrive and SharePoint. We can adjust that content just as we can do on the desktop applications to maybe change the length of the response. And very crucially there, you see that it changes that to a composed message that is ready to send. But what it's not doing is immediately sending that response in there. So it's drafted the response on a mobile experience, it's pulled in data that exists elsewhere within SharePoint, it's summarized that, and it's provided me with a draft that is ready to send. So the power of Copilot there being available both in the desktop experiences and the mobile experience. The final specific example we're going to show you is Copilot in Teams meetings. So in this example, how maybe do you react to being double booked for a meeting? And you can see that there's an option there. There's yes, no, and crucially, there's follow. So we can ask to follow a meeting, and we will receive a meeting recap of that missed meeting in our feed within Teams. And you can see there that we've got notes, we've got summary, we've got tasks, and we've also got easy to access links to content that was shared in that meeting as well. So again, this all relies on that data being accessible to us and visible within SharePoint. And we can then drill deeper into those notes to maybe ask what customers were discussed, what factors or decisions were asked in that meeting, why has maybe somebody picked a particular customer as the leading proposal to reference. And you can see that it will pull in from the meeting transcript a few responses, and it will also reference them so that we can browse to that particular point in the meeting. We can see who's made that citation, who's made that reference, and we can then click onto that point in the transcript and we can view the video from there. If we're joining a meeting late, or we're joining a meeting that's going on, we can ask it to recap what's been discussed so far. Again, that was shown in the intro video. And again, we can see some references there that are made to that point in time. And we can also ask Copilot to basically gauge the room. So maybe get a view of whether there's anyone in there that was particularly angry, maybe based on their tone, whether there was anything that was contentious, and maybe if there's anything that we should be aware of that's not going to be specifically visible in the transcript. So there's a lot of power there across the core Office suite that you've seen in about 10 minutes or so of using Copilot. So just a few summary examples really of how Copilot could impact by function. Again, we've seen a few examples around IT and finance and sales. From an IT perspective, we could have a project plan created for a specific product rollout. We can stay up to date on various different project calls that are going on. I'm sure all of us in here are familiar with having double booked meetings and needing to know which one we should maybe attend. Again, that follow button is going to be really useful to making sure that we're kept abreast of everything that's going on, not just the meetings that we're able to attend. So hopefully you're starting to see some examples where this could be used in your environment, and you're probably starting to get to the point of thinking, well, what can I do to prepare me and my organization for Copilot? So we've put together a brief summary of some of the requirements and what preparation can and should be done. And you're probably thinking, well, the high level requirements really are, have I got my file shares in 365? Am I using sensitivity labels? Have I got E5 security and compliance? What happens if I don't? And what Microsoft have done for the partner spaces, they've really broken down into two different sections. So we talk about being not only Copilot ready, but also being Copilot optimized and being fully ready to really make the most of Copilot in our organizations. And we talk about these so-called building blocks. So the essentials that you will need is M365 E3 and E5 for enterprise customers. Business Premium is also supported for those that are at that size, but keep in mind when we come to the licensing, there are some minimum seat requirements at the moment. And you'll need to be using Azure Enter ID, or what was known as Azure AD up until very recently. There's no specific requirements there around exclusively using Azure Enter ID, so hybrid identity is absolutely fine. And really, by the nature of you using M365 products, you'll have Azure Enter ID in place, I'm sure. The other fundamentals that we're talking about is the actual client application. So using Teams, using M365 apps for enterprise. There's a few more detailed and niche requirements around using up-to-date versions of those Office applications. So no longer will you be able to still be using Outlook 2013, for example, to get the Copilot benefit. I'd like to think that's fairly self-explanatory. And also we need to have users enabled for OneDrive. That's really the fundamentals of having the basics of Copilot in place. As we go up into the more intermediate levels, you'll see on the right hand side, we're talking about actually using OneDrive for Business. We're talking about having SharePoint in use. There's a lot of features, certainly around Teams, for example, that rely on you using SharePoint online, and actually starting to add in some of the more intermediate features around data loss prevention if you're not already. One of the key things to highlight in this section is around the SharePoint site restrictions. So making sure that knowing that users will have access to any data through Copilot that they've got visibility of, there may well be stuff that you want to restrict from Copilot. You can do that within SharePoint. So there are settings at a site level to restrict any content that resides in that SharePoint site from being surfaced by Copilot. So there is some additional protection you can put in place if you wanted certain content to not be surfaceable by Copilot, even if the user has access to it. And indeed, there's some more advanced features there around using Teams Phone, automatic retention and classification of content. And there's going to be a huge marketplace. There already is for custom APIs and custom plugins that will take this functionality beyond the data that resides within M365. So surfacing data, for example, from ServiceNow in your responses, which will no doubt be an incredibly powerful tool for many IT functions. And really, this is what we mean by being Copilot ready and being Copilot optimized. The readiness journey itself, it doesn't have to be a case of let's just get all those minimum requirements in place and then we'll do the optimize. You can absolutely be doing that optimize right now. And indeed, all of the services and settings that you've seen on that last screen are things arguably that you should already be doing as part of your M365 E3 or certainly E5 investment. Those work streams can run in parallel, and there's absolutely an argument to say that you should be doing this now if you've got any consideration of ultimately purchasing M365 Copilot. There's absolutely no need to wait until those Copilot licenses are available in your organization. There was a statistic from Microsoft that was taken, I think at about the halfway point or early on in the early access program that they recently ran. Those of you will probably know that Copilot, of course, hit GA on the 1st of this month. But through that early access program, there was quite a stark statistic, I think, of about 25% active usage of Copilot across those EAP customers. So customers that had actually paid to be in the preview were simply not using Copilot. And that was because they still had a lot of this readiness journey to embark on. They still didn't know who should get those M365 Copilot licenses. Start thinking about those discussions today and save yourself some time. There's some key feedback that was garnered from the EAP by Microsoft around defining a vision. So already define that vision and identify how Copilot will be used, not necessarily how it's going to actually be used today. So think ahead to when this licensing is available. Obtain that support already from senior leadership, from compliance and legal, business and IT decision makers. Get those people on board if they're not already. Consider your adoption processes, so consider enabling champion users across relevant business units, again, before you start just assigning those licenses out and thinking how users might get the best from Copilot. Start preparing relevant training in a variety of formats. So there's a ton of example videos out there. Of course, we've used some of those today. We've generated our own, but start to think what relevant training you will need across all those different departments, and absolutely create a communications plan to really celebrate and enable Copilot across your organization. Just a final point around licensing. Copilot today is currently only available to enterprise agreement customers. It will be coming to CSP, but there's no concrete date on that yet. There's been various different rumors about the end of the year, but certainly early next year, we should see it come to CSP. The early indications are that it will still have a minimum seat cap attached to it, which currently for those that are able to purchase it through EA remains 300 seats. So you'll have to purchase a minimum of 300 M365 Copilot licenses to get it in your environment. It's not available as part of any existing bundle or plan. So if you think that just because you've got M365 E5, you'll get this rolled in, unfortunately, that won't be the case. And there's absolutely no indication that that will change anytime soon. So there's no indication that Copilot will be bundled into existing licensing bundles that are out there today. Whether we may see a new E6 or E7 plan further down the line, who knows? But today, Copilot is and will for the foreseeable future remain a standalone add-on to existing licensing. Okay, there's an additional slide here just showing you some of the new and existing plugin partners to Copilot. I'm not going to go through those, but again, just to show that the normal Microsoft partnered culprits are in there. So again, this will allow you to start using data from other areas, not just what's in M365 in your tenant today, but actually going off to third-party environments and pulling in content that exists from there. I'm going to hand over to Guy to wrap up the formal side of this presentation, just talk about some readiness assessments that we're happy to offer. I'll be sticking around after with the rest of the Transparency team for any questions, but thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, George. Yeah, conscious we've obviously gone past the stated time limit, so thank you for those of you that are still with us. So I think as George has kind of touched on, obviously we appreciate some challenges around license availability for a number of customers, and some ambiguity of when it may become widely available. But one of the pieces really for most, and I think quite shown really within the stat George gave of about 25% of early adopters actually using it, is really there is a challenge around being ready for Copilot. There was a question in the chat around data security, and I think the response from Terence is ultimately the problem of data security still exists. It just makes this easier to access, people to pick up the wrong documents, the wrong data. If it's there and accessible to everybody, Copilot could find it. And whilst we would hope it wouldn't be used in any kind of malicious way, there is obviously a risk of unauthorized access just through use of the tool. So one of the options available to customers obviously looking to move through this journey, either whether they have access now or are going to get access shortly, or are waiting till next year for its wider availability on CSP, there is a Copilot readiness assessment to walk through some of the core steps that George referenced on the previous slides of actually how can we get our environment ready to take Copilot forward in a sensible way. So this is a 3-day workshop built by Microsoft and delivered by Transparency. There are a couple of things to note for this. So this is a funded workshop by Microsoft, available to a number of managed customers. It won't be available to all, but there is certainly an option for some clients to take this as a Microsoft funded route, which is great. For customers who don't fall into that, who perhaps are slightly smaller or don't sit in Microsoft's managed space, Transparency will look to co-fund the workshops to provide some of that value back to you. So I won't dive into each of these pieces individually, but certainly we're going to see this as a key step forward to people to get ready for Copilot, obviously beyond then making the changes required and rolling out that tool in the coming months. I'm going to share just a poll. I guess it would be really interesting just to get some feedback from people on whether this is something that's of interest. Obviously, we can follow up through myself and the wider Transparency team for customers who are interested in diving into a bit more detail, with myself or with George. And I guess as a summary, thank you everybody for taking the time. We know Copilot's generating a lot of interest, a lot of conversation. Obviously people restricted in getting their hands on it, which we know is a challenge. The commercial question was raised around the licensing, and again the 300 cap is again another challenge that we're seeing. We hope there will be movement on that, and I think to George's point, who knows, we may even see a bundled license in the future where this just becomes part of that service offering. I think would certainly make things kind of cleaner for everybody. So the poll's up on screen. If this is something that you've got interest in, obviously please do let us know. We can follow up afterwards, obviously check some eligibility of whether Microsoft will put their hands in their pockets for you, or whether we need to design something else. Obviously more than happy just to follow up with any additional questions outside of the call, and to George's note, we'll